Coach Pete Coulson joins us periodically on this program, gives us an update on goings on and some of his thoughts because he's got what you would call very, very unique life experiences. I was thinking I talked to him yesterday off air, and I was thinking afterwards that there's got to be a movie made about his life. And we're at 65, I'm going to call it 69. Temperatures ping-ponging around, coolest part of our morning at the moment. Bill Cawley with you, too, on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Coach, welcome back to the show.
Good morning, sir. It's always a pleasure to converse with you.
Hey, I got a quick question. I guess you probably didn't attend the Black Lives Matter rally in Boise last night.
I did not. I'm sorry. Forgive me. Because all lives matter.
Yeah, you've been mentioning that on the air, and that is the Christian perspective, as we've been hearing, is all lives matter. And if you look at it that way, if everyone would look at it that way, it would really diffuse this whole situation.
Oh, definitely. And I think yesterday in talking with Donnell about it, he said, what we as people need to do is reconcile our faith, reconcile where our value system is, and so we have a better understanding of the uniqueness God has made in each one of us based on our color, based on our other features that allow us to impact lives. And I thought that was pretty profound because I think that's something that's the message that's lost, is that what are we doing to impact lives with our faith-based concepts?
When I first heard his comments a couple of weeks ago that he was looking to have some training sessions in his school district, and of course, being the biggest one in the state, whatever happens there likely could be picked up in other districts. I was a little wary of it because you think, okay, this could be all one-sided when it comes to diversity training. But he seems like he's very open to hearing from other sides. We talked a little bit off air yesterday about just there is a very what you call a native Idahoan culture, and you know if all sides could start listening to the other side, at least hear their concerns, and maybe understand where they're coming from, it might ease a lot of these tensions.
Oh, I think so. I mean, I've always been a big believer in communication and learning to listen to hear, not listening to speak. And that, what I mean by that is understanding where people are coming from. And he made a good point about just the education system and how it's just evolved to the point that the middle-class kid can't survive because the expectations are that everybody succeeds, but everybody succeeds at different levels.
Well, and cookie cutter, I guess is the best way to put that.
Yes.
I know that I talked to educators back when I was young, and they said, well, there's no other way to do this, but that's simply not true. We have lots of options if we would have I know a lot of people in public education don't like to hear this, but if we had school choice, there'd be tremendous opportunities for people to find a good match for that child.
Well, definitely. I mean, he was talking about the kids that come into class, and let's say you have a freshman class, about 30 students or so, and the teacher says at the end of the 10-week period, we're going to take a test. Well, for some people, that's easy. But you've got the kid that's in a two-parent household that parents are trying to make a living, trying to survive. They don't have the time to spend to help that kid with his studies. You have the other kid that's from a doctor's home where there's a lot more flexibility. They're not going to have that difficulty. So you set some of those kids up for failure by that statement in of itself. You just cause them to panic because they know what the end result is, because they know their circumstances prior to taking a test. And Donna made a very good point. He says we need to be human about impacting lives. Understand that person's condition so we can educate them in a beneficial way. And I thought that's pretty profound.
Hey, we've got a caller looking to join us. Do you want to point out if you'd like to reach Coach Pete today? It is 208-736-0300, 208-736-0300. And caller, you're up next. You're on the air with Coach Pete Coulson. Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Dan. I live here in Twin Falls. I've never called in before, but I listen to you guys a lot. I didn't really have anything for the coach, but I heard you talking earlier about Walmart wanting people to buy online so they get a better profit.
Yeah, I'd like to keep. This is my guest time at the moment. I'd like to keep it to that subject, though.
Okay, maybe I just call in some other time and
that'd be
talk
fine.
to you about this.
Super,
All
thank
right,
you.
I'll do it.
Thank you.
I couldn't get to you earlier, but I'll call back.
All right, thank you much for the call, sir. Of course, Coach Pete and I also had a conversation about that very same subject yesterday off the air, but I'm not sure you want to go there today.
Not today.
um,
The world is changed by example, not by my opinion.
yeah. um, but when you were talking about this a moment ago, I can recall I had a friend in school by the name of Howie Hardy, and Howie was he was a brilliant guy when it came to numbers. And if you put him, he was always in advanced math classes, and he in his spare time, get this, he would buy these workbooks in various, like you could go to the drugstore and buy workbooks where you could do various math problems and the like, and that was his hobby. I mean, that's what he did to relax he liked to golf too, I should point out, but that's what he was otherwise doing. But if you put him in history class, he was bored silly, and and unfortunately, he didn't go off to college because that cookie cutter style. They said, well, you're really not as proficient in these areas as you should be, but with the mathematical mind he had, the engineering work he could have done if he'd been allowed to go that route.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, this is what we're losing.
Right, and I think that's what Donnell is trying to say. We have so many culture that is all about power that forget about the person. And I was explaining to him when I first started refereeing, I'm not your typical referee because I look at as refereeing as an opportunity to teach life skills. So I modified my style within the context of the rules, but allowing to look at each individual person so they can become the best player. And it's the same for a teacher. They need to look at that person first before they look at the pupil and their success as a pupil. How can you understand them as a person? Because that's when they're going to make their difference, and that's when they're going to be heard. If you make a cookie-cutter environment, you'll have people falling on the cracks, and they're going to feel slighted. They're going to feel that they've not been given a fair chance because they're set up to fail.
Well, I think about my own experiences. There were certainly courses I didn't want to be in, and I used to get to the point where my stomach would be in knots when I had to walk through the door, and I just, I didn't look forward to it. And if I got an opportunity, sometimes, I hate to say this, when I was in about the ninth grade, if I could find a way not to go to school, I wouldn't. And I had other friends who did the same
I get a
thing.
hot seat by my parents if I did that. It's called discipline.
Yeah, I ended up generally going, but it was there were a couple of years where it just didn't seem like it was fun, and I had other interests. I read the other day a column written by a woman who says there's a new movement. It's almost like people who talk about free range when you have animals, but it's you basically allow your kids to read what they want to read. You don't if you're homeschooling them, for instance, if they want to read a comic book, you let them do that. If they want to read a manual for fixing a lawnmower, you let them do that. But she said the whole idea is they're still reading. It's just let them develop in that direction of their own interests. And again, we can't seem to get around that in public school.
Yeah, it seems kind of funny because, I went through that when I came here from Europe. I went in the third grade. I didn't meet the standard. I was flunked. And I'm glad the teacher did that. But I think we've gotten to the point where we just pass people through just because, and then they get in the older ages in life and they feel slighted. And I think sometimes we don't understand the benefit of failure. I have my Petism. To fail is fixing my attitude and actions intentionally so I can learn. And so sometimes you have to take a couple steps back to go forward, but that's looked at as a negative rather than a positive. But in life, we're going to have those moments where we're not going to be the best at what we do. But as we collectively recognize that we can do that as a team, we're more successful. And so that's where the teacher partners up with the students. Say, okay, how can I help you learn? What can I help you to understand what we're trying to bring across here, given your current circumstances? What can we do to help you? And that's not done anymore.
Yeah, I think that the teachers themselves, because paperwork that they're involved with and what they have to meet, those obligations they have even outside the classroom. I've got to tell you, I've got teachers in the family, and they're overwhelmed at times.
Oh, definitely. And I think we have some administrators that have this mindset, they can just suck it up. or the parent can just suck it up and things like that. And that's not true. That's not being realistic. There's parents that are doing the best they can with what they have to help their child succeed, and that's not respected because somebody's got this class system. I'm above you, so I can speak down on you. And that should never, ever take place.
Well, there's the other part, too. You know, the poorer students. I can recall I had a friend who ran for mayor in a city that he lived in back east, and he did not win the primary. He finished third, but he wanted to change the way his city had some control over the local school district. So he wanted to change the way. He said, for instance, you have these meetings. They were busing kids across town, and he said, I'm opposed to busing students because he said, I'm not. I know that the intentions of the people who came up with that idea in the first place were probably good, but he said, if you've got a mother who may not have a car, she's also
Right.
trying to work a couple of jobs, perhaps. She may be a single mom to, support her kids. And then they tell her, well, we want to have a parent-teacher conference. She's got to find a way across this city of 150,000 people, take that time off from work, may lose a day's pay. He said, we've got issues. He said, we need to go back to an approach. If you had neighborhood schools, you have a much better relationship than between the parents and the teachers because there's a lot more interaction that goes on.
Right. You're empowering them to be the best they can. You recognize that they are human. They have a human condition, and you need to be sensitive to that. Every child is not the same. I mean, I look at the 10 adopted kids my parents have. We're all different personalities. We all look at life from a different vantage point. And did my parents have the time to really just dissect each person's emotional need? No. But I saw through that process the importance of me being able to reach out to other people to help me understand, okay, how do I live life? Who can I lean into to help me figure out what mom and dad are trying to tell me? And I hate to say it, sometimes the teacher is the best person to do that, or a coach, or somebody in some extracurricular activity that takes the time out from life and from education, educates the person.
I had some teachers like that. I mean, I got lucky in the sense that I could probably name half a dozen of them that took much of a great interest in me. And it was, my parents couldn't always do it because they were hardworking people. But I had teachers, if they took a special interest in your work and they looked over your shoulder, they talk about mentoring. I don't even think we called it that at the time, but that's what was taking place.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think in my years in orphanage, I was being mentored how to interact with people when there's a lot of oppositions in society. I mean, we were post-World War II kids, a lot of Hitler mindset, but that never stopped the people to trying to influence my life in a positive way. Did I do everything right? Of course not. But I was disciplined for that to get it right. And I think that's what you need, those people that become your friends, not to tell you only what you want to hear, but what you need to hear. And my faith helped me through that process.
I just was thinking, I was talking to a friend the other day on the telephone, and we don't get to talk as much as we used to because we're separated by a couple of thousand miles. But he said something about, he said, growing up as a kid, he always felt his mom and dad were telling him he was stupid. But he had teachers that took an interest in him. And when your teacher tells you you're not, that's a big deal in your life.
Oh, definitely. I mean, sometimes as parents, and I have two daughters, and sometimes we've had our conflicts, but I've always said I love them, but sometimes you have to listen to other people to tell you what I'm trying to tell you, because sometimes you don't hear it from me, but you hear it from your friend.
We got to take a short break. We've got more coming up with Coach Pete Coulson this morning on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com. We're at 72. It's 20 minutes after 8 o'clock, and Bill Colley with you on Magic Valley this morning. And Coach Pete Coulson spending a few more minutes with us this morning on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com. It's 72 at 8:22. Bill Colley on Magic Valley this morning. The Coach and I were just talking about various tastes people have in programming and what they listen to and viewpoints. And I want to get to this in just a moment because we talked about it a bit yesterday, and it's something you've had in the works for a while. But before we do that, if people wanted to get in touch with you, how do they go about that?
They can go email me at coachcoulson@gmail.com. That's probably the easiest way to do that. Or give me a call, and you can give them their number if they ask for it.
Yeah, the last name, by the way, we want to mention, because there's different spellings of Coulson. Yours is Coulson.
Correct.
Yeah.
Coach Coulson@gmail.com.
Well, we talked yesterday. You are getting a little closer to getting a regular podcast up and running. It may not be until probably beginning of next year or late this year. But this is the future of a lot of this discussion that we have is really going. We talked about this yesterday because you can really focus with a podcast on a particular subject matter, and you really where I'm much more of a generalist. In your case, a podcast gives you an opportunity to really drill down on all of those lessons in life.
Well, definitely. I've been doing some YouTube stuff with a pastor in Roseburg, Oregon. He's been asking me some questions about this racism and a lot of things like that. We have just a very candid discussion about that particular subject and how we as Christians can make a difference in our society. And I think that's so important. I think that the thing I always try to remind others is listen to hear, not just listen to speak. And I have to do that for myself is listen, what are they asking me? What are they telling me about their story? And I think that's a level of communication. Dennis and I have a great conversation on a weekly basis just about some of these tough subjects. And I think sometimes we've avoided them because of whatever, but we can't. We have to recognize that there's a big divide in our society. We need to bring each other together rather than spread it further apart. And there's some crazy assumptions made. And I think this is a way you can kind of vent your stuff and have a discussion about it in a positive, constructive way.
Well, you came to this country as a boy, and this is a question I guess I hadn't thought about asking you. But in those few decades since you've been here, do you think that the race relations in this country have gotten better, or about the same, or are they worse? Where do you see it standing?
Well, I think in some ways it's gotten worse because people have just kind of they've been afraid to speak their points of view. And I think a lot of it also is, and in some ways I don't think, I never look for it, but I hear it a lot. And when I hear even somebody making slight remarks at me, I kind of have to stop for a second. Are you for real? But I think we just don't want to talk about it because we're afraid we might step on somebody's toe. We need to talk about it. And I hate to say it, but some of our churches are the worst people about that because we become so perfectionistic about life. There's only one perfect person. It's not me. And we need to understand each other that everybody has a story, no matter what culture they come from, whatever. And I think that's the thing that's forgotten. And I think that's why we have this divide. I think of these protesters, I think they're just doing the blame game. They're unwilling to take responsibility for their actions and reactions and choices in life. And they blame the system for that. And some of it's their own fault, and some of it's that the system has enabled this behavior. And I think that's where the problem starts, is that look at a football team. They've got all sorts of ethnic groups in that. You don't see a lot of fighting amongst the team because the coach has taught them how to play as a team with their differences. And I think that's what's forgotten. We don't look at life as a team. We look at it individually, and that's where we lose power.
Well, growing up, the only black person I knew was a boy in my brother's class, but they were a farm family, so culturally they were so much like everybody else in town for that reason. When I went off to college was the first time I ever met anybody, black people who were from urban environments. And, culturally, they were quite different. But if you went out and you walked around campus with them and had a conversation, you found out that they enjoyed a good joke and that they had a lot of the same interests. They had a lot of the same goals.
Yeah, and like I was telling Donnell yesterday, my upbringing was totally different than his because I grew up in a mid-class white family, but yet I was a person of color, and so that created its own set of issues. But understanding my perspective, him and understanding his perspective helped us understand there's a common ground. We are all part of the human race. What are we doing to impact lives? How are we integrating our faith into what we do on a daily basis? Do we understand what true love is? Do we understand what forgiveness is, what grace is, what humility is? Do we really understand that? And unfortunately, we have a lot of egotistical people in our systems that don't understand that.
I'm reminded of a story just quickly before we wrap up. I was in college and I was I was outside and I was going into town to go to what I heard was a magazine stand. I wanted to get a Sports Illustrated, and I ran into one of my dorm mates. He was a black man, and he said, that's a really good store. I go there all the time. And I said, okay, thank you. He says, yes, they even have magazines for black folks. So, that's when I realized he had a really good sense of humor and that I could have a conversation with him, and he was quite lighthearted about things. And it kind of opened some doors in that situation.
Well, I think it's so important not to focus on the difference, but focus on a commonality to help the local community. And call people like that individual that made that remark to Danielle, call them for that stuff and say, hey, this is not very appropriate for this setting. Let's have a talk about it, and don't apologize and then go back the next week with the same kind of an attitude, but be sincere about what you want to do to change your world and change your community, and allow the system to let you do things, but also use your own creativity in educating others. I referee. I know the rules, but I bend the rules because I'm looking at using that as a tool for life. And I was telling Danielle my first experience of reffing that one kid that mouthed off to me, and I go, what's going on with him? Only to realize that he lost his dad. Player first? No. Person first, player second. Because if I don't understand the person, how can I educate them? And there's a lot of educated kids out there that have empty stomachs. They're emotionally empty. What do we do to fill them to help them?
Coach, I got to say thank you on that note. We'll talk again soon.
Okay, God bless you, my friend. We'll be in touch.
You too, sir. Thank you. Coach Pete Coulson joining us this morning on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 8:30. We're at 71. Bill Colley on Magic Valley this morning.